bespoke radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Welcome, Fade to Black. Today is Monday, March 3rd, 2025. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Let's do this, man. Here we go. Brand new week on Fade to Black, and you can help support the show and all of our hard work around here by getting yourself a Fade to Black t-shirt. We have two shirts, two ways to get them. The links are below. We've got two new designs coming out. I'm going to present those later on this week. Now, this week on Fade to Black tonight, Hakim Isler is with us. Remote viewing, that and much more. Tomorrow night, Jill Jackson is with us, channeling Solomon. Interesting. Wednesday night, Dr. Glenn Ryan is with us, quantum consciousness. And then Thursday night, Chloe Deshevny is with us, and we're going to talk about star seeds. All right, now I have five, count them, five major events coming up. I've got more to add, but right now, Rise of the Guardians, which is March 29th and 30th, 2025 in Sedona, Arizona. After that, I head to the Midwest for the Contact Modalities Expo. That is May 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, 2025, Delavan, Wisconsin at Delavan Lake. Then I head back here to Los Angeles for Contact in the Desert, which is May 29th through June 2nd in Palm Springs, California. And then I head south to Peru with Brian Forrester for the Inca celebration of the sun. And that is June 17th through the 27th, 2025. Now, that tour technically closed on March 1st. I don't know if there are any seats left. So go to Hidden Inca Tours. The links are below. And see if there is room. I don't know if there is, but if you want a paradigm shift in your life, come to Peru with Brian Forrester and I. And then after that, it's the Psi Games, August 1st through the 3rd, 2025 in Charlottesville, Virginia. And the links for that are below. That's right, Psychic Games. That's right. And I get to be my best self, a game show host for the Psi Games. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the Psi Games. The links for that are below with Hakim Isler. Tonight's show is about remote viewing. And now here's the thing. He is the creator of the Psi Games. And, it's about unlocking human potential. We're going to talk about his journey in wilderness training, and what I've got for you on that is going to surprise you. And also the practical applications of all of these abilities that are inside of us all. The links are below for Psi Games International, and I would like to welcome for the first time to Fade to Black, Hakim Isler. Hakim, how you doing, brother?
Hey, what's going on, brother? It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I'm going to throw Hakim under the bus. No sound check. Straight to video tonight, man. Just Hakim checks in 15 seconds before the show. I thought I was about to do an Ask Me Anything emergency show and have to have Michelle rebook you. And I was real nervous about that. But anyway, you made it. And no sound check, no video check, no nothing. This is rock and roll. It ain't the Boy Scouts, Hakim. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Well, I figured you had all those guitars behind you, and we were just like doing a improv rock and roll show, like you said.
Right. Buttering me up about my guitar collection isn't going to get you back on Santa's good list.
Yeah.
So yeah, nice try though. That was good. That was well played. Well played. Hakim, we've got a lot to discuss tonight, and I do want to talk about the Psi Games too as well, which we'll be doing a lot over the next few months. But before we get there, some may be looking at you right now going, I know this guy, right? And so I'm gonna go straight there. Okay. Naked and Afraid. Naked and Afraid.
Yeah.
And um I it's a great show, first off. It's a show that I will never be a contestant on. I can assure you that. And it's an impressive show. But how did you get selected for that?
Yeah, so it's a really funny story. A friend of mine who is special forces, or was special forces, he's retired now, but we would always link up and have coffee. And so he knew about my wilderness outdoor stuff that I was teaching, and one day, he was like, "Hey, man, you know, why aren't there more black people in these shows like survival stuff?" And I was like, "What?" I was like, "Of course, there's people." And that was just being, we were going back and forth, and he was like, "Have you ever heard of this Naked and Afraid show?" And I was like, "No." He was like, "Oh, this is." Guy and a girl, they're both naked, they go out. He was like, "So if you really are serious about being survival guy, you should really try that. I bet you wouldn't do something like that." So now you got these two special ops guys sitting at coffee, and one's challenging the other. So I was like, okay, I'm going to show this guy. Hold my coffee. So I go that night, and I go online, and I filled out applications. So when we got back together, I could tell him that I tried and it failed and nothing happened. And so months go by, and then all of a sudden I get a call from these guys, and they're like, "We want you." And I was like, "Whoa, okay, now game is on. I can't back out now, or my friend would be right." And so I was like, "I'm not going to let that happen. So I have to go now, and I have to do this." And so I did it. And it was actually one of the most profound experiences of my life.
Is it real?
It is real. I don't know where it is now. This was 2013 was the first one I did, and that was when it was fairly new. And so they would have my episode. I had one producer, two camera guys, and one sound guy, and we were out in the middle of the Himalayan mountains in India, and they were adamant about us not using anything we found. So we found any modern stuff, we couldn't use it, even if it was out there in the wild. And we had to live off the land and like really go through that process. So it was as real as it gets. Other than if you've got really ill or you were going to die, they would, of course, medevac you out, but other than that, it was like, "Hey, figure it out on your own, guys. And we're just here to document the experience."
So your producer and your camera guy are eating real food,
Yes.
and you're eating worms and snow.
Yes. Yeah. I was eating worms, snails,
Oh,
leaves off the ground. I mean, it was you, when you get that hungry, man, you're like, you're in it. So, and they would never, they had a rule. They would never eat around you. So they had like uh, a camp like that was a mile away. That was a medic camp in case one of us got ill. They could get us there, faster than getting us all the way back to like the real camp. And so they would go there and they would eat, and that was off limits for us. We couldn't come anywhere near that thing. And then what would happen is they would come back. But by day 7, our sense of smell was so strong that you could smell the food coming out of their pores.
yeah, for sure. You could smell them. They probably had a big pit with a pig on it, and that's wafting over the hill.
Yeah, right.
Oh man. And yeah, you're right. So how many we're going to move on, but I think for most of us, we're all very curious about shows like that. And here is an opportunity to talk to a cast member that has gone through this. How many days did you last?
So I was out there for 21 days. Yeah.
How
Yeah.
much weight did you lose?
40 pounds in 3 weeks.
Oh man. And you're already in shape. So where did you lose the weight from?
Oh, it was literally muscle. I did gain some weight to go out there on the show, but still wasn't enough. And I was telling somebody just a story the other day where there's a video I took of myself in the Himalaya Mountains like 2 days before we started the show. And I'm on this little shack or the roof of this like little small building I was staying in to climatize. And I'm like doing push-ups and sit-ups, and I'm like doing all this workout, and I'm like I got all these muscles or whatever, and then at the end of that thing, I couldn't do one push-up. I could barely stand up. It was crazy.
I can't. I'm at 21 days losing 40 pounds.
Yeah.
Wow, man. So before we move on, just a couple of, man to man here. You're about my height, right? Okay, we're about the same height. We've hung out. We definitely have the same body. I know that you aspire, to have what I have, and that's good. A lot of people do. But me losing 40 pounds on my frame would take me to nothing, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of 21 days, was it your diet or just a lack of food? Was it the change of diet? How do you take 40 pounds off of your frame? I just can't imagine.
So they calculated based on what they saw us eat, that we ate, me and my partner ate a total of 800 calories in 4 weeks.
Oh.
So basically it was fasting 3 weeks. So basically it was fasting for 3 weeks, pretty much.
Wait, 800 calories over 21 days?
Yes, over the entirety of the show.
I opened my mouth and I inhale 800 calories. We all do, right?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so if you think about that, it was a lot of fasting, and then it was a cold environment. At night it was 32, and the day it got up to about 60 some days. So you're consistently cold, so you're shivering all the time. You have no food, so you're building shelter and looking for food and getting clean water. So you're constantly working, then you're constantly shaking, and then on top of that you have no food. So yeah, it was a happy recipe to lose a crazy amount of weight in no time.
That's insane to me. Now, what did you learn from that? What's your takeaway? Except for the obvious one, you've got the biggest set of balls known to man. No, I'm being very serious. I mean, but what was your takeaway? What did you learn?
I would say that my biggest takeaway for me was that I had a profound awakening while I was out there. I thought, especially being a PSYOP guy in the military, a guy who understands human psychology and how we operate and how we work, I thought I knew about how I operated and how I worked. And what the Himalaya Mountains did for me was and being out there, it really stripped off all of the mask that I had been wearing, like most of us, for so long. And it really showed me what was truly important in the world, which
like a cheeseburger. Man. Okay, continue. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be so cavalier, but that is indeed very impressive. I mean, you go and you face death, right? You face death.
Yeah.
So the removing of the mask, the true self. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So I had been hiding for myself on a lot of different things, and I really became awakened to that. I also found out and had confronted the fact that I had been dealing with PTSD for a really long time, and for my military time, and I had never accepted it until that moment, and that we are, as human beings, very capable of much more than what we believe. And we have much more. So for instance, at day 7, I started hearing things in the ground moving, and I thought I was going crazy. And it turns out that my sense of hearing had heightened, my sense of sight had heightened, and all these different things started improving. Like I already told you about smell, came better. So I started realizing like, whoa, this is something that I had not had before, even in combat, like not to this extreme, not to this level. So that showed me on a physical level, gross level, that we were capable of much more. And then, of course, I had all of the experience with my psyche and really diving deep there, which then in turn became more of a spiritual awakening as well.
What was the first thing you ate when you were done?
So they gave us a choice, and because we were in India, there was no. I would have wanted my first meal to be a cheeseburger.
Yeah. Pepperoni pizza, something, right?
Yeah,
Right.
but the cow is sacred there, so they were like, no, you can't do that. So I chose butter. I chose the worst thing ever, which I should have known better, but I was too hungry to care. I chose buttered chicken.
Yeah, butter. That's their dish, right?
Yeah. And that thing was so rich that it destroyed any idea of a stomach that I even had. So, and it hit me so hard because, again, I went from eating nothing to now I'm putting in this rich buttered chicken in my stomach. It was the worst thing. And I only took maybe a bite and a half because my stomach had shrank to that small level that I couldn't fit anything in. But that was enough to mess me up for like 2 or 3 weeks. I still, when I got back to the States, even though I was, voiding my brains out, I still tried to get a Five Guy cheeseburger.
yeah, right. Do you dream about food?
Oh yes, you do. It's like it gets really weird after a while.
Right.
You start having dreams about food, and you can't, and you become obsessed. Where you can't stop thinking about what you're gonna eat, how you're gonna eat. I felt like the guy Bubba and what is his name? Run Forrest, like Forrest Gump.
Yeah, Bubba Gump.
Where
Bubba
I was
Gump.
just talking about, you got fried shrimp and cat shrimp and all that stuff.
Shrimp scampi. Yeah. So you flew from Nepal or the Himalayas. When you come back, you went to New York. Did you land in New York?
Yeah, either that or it was Jersey, I think. Or
well, okay, but that's not my point. My point is, you go out of customs, you get in the first Uber, you go to Times Square, and you get a friggin' slice of pizza. That's what you do. Then go back to the airport. That's what I would have done. Let's back up. You've mentioned special forces, and this is a very important point, and we're going to get into remote viewing and psyops and everything throughout this show tonight. Of course, the Psi Games. But how long were you in special forces?
So technically, I was special forces is a branch of special operations forces. I was in PSYOP, which is also a branch of special operations forces. So I just want to make that distinction because you got weirdos out there who might try to attack me and be like, you weren't a special forces guy. Yeah, I was a special operator in PSYOP, which is a different branch, but the same umbrella.
Okay, what branch of the military does that fall under?
The Army.
Army, okay.
Mm-hmm. So I was in the PSYOP Corps for 4 years, and in that time, I spent almost 2 of it overseas.
Okay, so when you were in the States, where were you stationed?
Fort Bragg.
Fort Bragg. And then overseas, where were you stationed?
I was stationed in Iraq, in Ramadi specifically, Al-Anbar province.
And okay, so now the psychic just explain to me what on your DD-214, right? Your MOS.
Yeah.
What does that say? Does it say psychic spoonbender? I mean, what's the classification on a DD-214 for you?
It's a 37 Fox, which is PSYOP, psychological operations.
Get out. There really is that. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep. 37 Fox. And that's our designator. And then PSYOP is what you actually are. And And basically what PSYOP is our definition is to persuade, change, and influence the hearts and minds of a foreign target audience, using by means of, media, sound, communication, face-to-face interaction, all different methods of information.
You have to take that a step further. How do you apply it?
How do I apply PSYOP? So you use those different means of communication and information to persuade people and influence their beliefs, their value system, or their logic towards a specific goal that you set.
I would hate to be your kids. It'd be the worst. You couldn't get away with anything. Why are we doing exactly what Dad wants us to? I don't know. It's strange, man. I cut the grass 3 times this week. So is this with through media, printed media, radio, television, things like that? And am I understanding correctly?
Yeah, any way that a person would get information. So all of those are fair game, even face-to-face interaction, person-to-person interaction, digital media, printed media, sound media, all those different aspects are things that we're using as means to persuade, change, and influence the hearts and minds of, a particular target audience.
And what did you learn? What's your takeaway from a gig like that? Did you find talents that you didn't know that you had?
Well, I went into it because I felt like I had a specific talent for that set. Being an entertainer in my former life as a DJ and things of that nature, I felt like I had this knack for communicating and being able to tell stories and things of that nature. So that was kind of like there. But the thing I learned the most was that it really helped me understand that we all have a hook. And also we all are susceptible to PSYOP, and this idea that we never know what we think we know, and to always stay open to that possibility. A matter of fact, one of the things that I truly believed when I was in is, and other people confirm this as well, is that the person who believes they know, without a doubt, I know, are always the easiest to fool. And they're the easiest to work PSYOP on because you just package everything in their knowing.
Interesting.
You package everything.
So you're saying, okay, so I'm the host of the Psi Games. You're telling me that I didn't make that decision. That's what you're telling me.
Yeah,
well played.
It was already made for you, man.
Yeah, well played. But what I find interesting here is you just mentioned everybody has a hook.
Yes.
Right? So define what a hook is, and then once you find out what that hook is, what's the play?
Yeah, so everybody has something that is going to motivate them towards an action in a particular direction, right? And so to take action in a particular direction is what I was trying to say. So if you think about that, so that could be your belief system, that could be your value system, that could be your logic system, right? If you're a logical person, and then finding the hook on that. What
about sex and gambling and bad habits and drugs?
Yeah, those are all motivating factors that could be hooks, right? And so money is another one, all
of
these
course, right.
Material things. So those material things, sometimes it's some people's hooks could be spiritual things, or what they would deem as a spiritual thing. So just really understanding what those things are, and that's what these organizations and groups do. And and then taking that hook and then packaging whatever it is the goal of your unit or your commander is. So really,
now this is interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
let's use me as an example.
Yeah.
Okay. I never definitively say yes or no to anything. I stay in the middle. So right there, you've got a problem with me. I'm not motivated by money. So you've got that problem. I'm not motivated by sex or gambling or right. I have none of those little tasty nuggets that would be appealing for somebody to try to manipulate. But yet you got me to host the games. So what was your approach to somebody like me that would be a problem?
That's great. I didn't run a psyop on you.
Yeah, you did too. Oh, stop with that. But you understand the question though, right? When nobody's got those things that you would normally look for, what's the next play?
No, everybody has a hook. You just have to. If you haven't found a hook, it means you hadn't dug deep enough into where they are.
It was the Harley that you sent me. Oh, I forgot about that. Hakim sent me a second Harley. It's beautiful, by the way. Thank you for that. I guess you got to me there. That worked. Did you have psychic abilities before the military?
I did. Actually, I had some pretty profound experiences where I was younger. One, three in which I've been writing about recently. One was that I actually dreamt the lottery, and I told my mom. I woke up. I was about 8 or so. I woke up and I said, "Hey, I know you played the lottery. I had these numbers come to me." I gave them to her. She played them locally, but they came out nationally, which was a bigger pot. Had she played nationally, we would have won millions of dollars, but she played locally and it didn't come out locally. It came out nationally. So we didn't win anything. Later, I end up having an instance where I foresaw this guy with a baseball bat letting it go and it smashing into the head of a person on this fence. And I just had this feeling, and it was happening in real time. And I moved out of that location that I was standing next to this guy with this baseball bat. And I moved down like 2 people, and the guy goes to swing at this ball. The bat slips out of his hand, and it smashes the kid in the head where I was standing, the kid who took my spot. So I had several things that happened in my life that were like that, where I foresaw what was going to happen, and it ended up happening. And I remember that very well. And so I had psychic abilities, even though I wasn't calling them that and believing that per se, even before I started this practicing it.
I can't wait for somebody to come up to me and go, "Jimmy, you look great. You've lost so much weight. What are you doing?" "I'm doing the Isler." "Oh, really? What's that?" You eat dirt and snow for 3 weeks. Guaranteed weight loss. Guaranteed. You were stationed originally at Fort Bragg.
Mm-hmm.
And going into this very specific branch of the military. Were you aware of the remote viewing programs that were going on at Fort Meade? And did other people talk about this?
No, not while I was in. It wasn't something that was...
Can I get you to sit a little closer to... I need the... Yeah, there you go. Oh, go ahead. So did you hear about the remote viewing programs in the Army?
Not while I was in. I didn't hear about them while I was in. I heard about remote viewing from my ninjutsu teacher, because Del Graff had approached him, or they had a connection before, where the ninja in their martial art system had these abilities that they practiced. And so somehow him and Del got linked up and they started working. Del was working through the remote viewing at Wright Pat Air Force Base. He had his own program going on, and my teacher was a part of that. And he would tell us about that, because this was far after the remote viewing program had ended. And he would tell us about that. And I still wasn't really tapped into it as much. I did some stuff, but not to the degree in which I did when I met Paul Smith and I started really training in remote viewing.
And how did you, Paul's been on the show a couple of times. He's a great friend. Paul introduced us, actually. Um, but a little background, I'll let you do it, but
Mhm.
Paul Smith is one of the most profound remote viewers on this planet. He's extraordinary. And I think his better gift is teaching. He's a great teacher. He's a great speaker. How did you meet Paul?
So I met Paul. I sought him out because once I started to look at the way I came about looking for remote viewing was that I started working with kids at my schools, my martial arts schools, and I would see them pretending to be these ninja characters, these animation characters, and they would do these mudras with their finger and say words and pretend they were spitting fireballs and stuff like that. And I would tell them like, hey, in our ninja practice, that's where a lot of this stuff came from. And there's things that I can do and that people can do and that you could do. And they'd say, show me. And I really didn't have an answer for them. I didn't have a way to show them in a fast way protocol that they can have that experience now. And so I was like, man, we really got to keep this going for the next generation. How do we do that? And I started to do some research, and I remembered my teacher talking about this remote viewing thing, and I looked it up and I found Paul. And I was like, I need to train with this guy. So I went and trained with him, and I'm so glad I did because, like you said, his power, his superpower, is his ability to speak and teach about remote viewing. I mean, it's profound. I mean, it's like he is really balanced in the way he approaches it, and he will tell you how he feels about stuff, and he'll also tell you when he's wrong. I've heard him on multiple occasions during classes where, as well as I do, if you're teaching a class, it's real easy to tell people to shut up or get out if they don't agree with you. But I've heard people change his mind during class.
No, Paul's never been wrong a day in his life. He's listening right now. Paul. I'll say this about Paul, then I want to get back to remote viewing.
Mhm.
I hang out with some pretty cool people. Okay, I do. I mean, like, man, I hang out with the shit. Okay, I've seen Paul, and I mean very serious people at this dinner table. I'm not going to get into details on that, but okay, the tippity top. And I've watched Paul silence the table. Everybody listening to Paul, and he's so, it's because he's never wrong. That he is so elegant in his delivery, and he's just got interesting stuff to say. He's lived an extraordinary life. So that's enough. I think the world of Paul Smith. I do.
Yeah.
I absolutely do. Remote viewing itself, I think that a lot of people have their own definition of it, that they
Yeah.
don't actually understand what we are talking about. Some do. That's fine. What's your definition? What is remote viewing?
So remote viewing essentially is to be able to perceive things in a different time and place that you would otherwise not have access to. So, where you are right now in the bathroom, like I don't have access to that. Or in a back room somewhere around where you are, I don't have access to that. You could take the camera and bring me there, but I can perceive things about that space and hear where I'm at and write those things down. And that's basically what remote viewing is. As a matter of fact, at one point they thought it should be called remote perception, not necessarily viewing, because you don't necessarily, for the most part, actually see things. You're not viewing anything, but you're really perceiving, and those perceptions are what you then capture down on, and write down on a sheet of paper or something of that nature. And so that's really what happens. And that's my explanation of remote viewing. And I hope if Paul is listening, I did a good job, or he'll call me up and berate me with.
He's remote viewing this. He doesn't even have to listen to the show. He's here. He's here. I can bring him up on the screen.
Yeah, his hair is falling out right now from that.
Yeah. No doubt. That's okay. There are some that talk about an extreme talent of remote viewing to the point of being able to read papers on a desk in a room on the other side of the world. What is that still remote viewing, or is that jumping into another classification?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the things that I think that really happens with that is that it more pulls into the description of what we would call clairvoyance, right? Now there is Tom McNair, and Tom McNair was one of the people who were in an original program who moved on, and then midway through the program, or a little bit earlier on, he moved on, and then but he became friends. He stayed friends with Ingo and was one of Ingo's friends and best students. And beyond stage 6, Tom McNair started to develop stage 7 and then beyond, where these sounds, he started to hear sounds, and he started to perceive words and things of that nature. And he started moving into those later stages. When a person like a Pat Price, per se, who I think you may be referring to, because he was one that would do that, he could actually go and see what was written somewhere. And he proved, and that was proven right several times. That type of individual, it could be remote viewing, but also could be clear seeing, clairvoyant at the same time. So they're actually in the matrix, per se, in this field of consciousness, and they're able to go out there and bilocate and grasp information in a very visual perception. But that's not originally what remote viewing was supposed to be. Remote viewing, again, they thought it would be more remote perception, the way it was designed, and these other things started to develop later on in their practices.
Where are you? What stage are you?
I've been trained up to Paul's like stage 6, and going through that process. And so I wouldn't say stage 6. I've done some clay modeling and things of that nature. So I'd say I'm probably more proficient with like stage 5, so, but then the clay modeling and things of that nature becomes like the next stages. So
what is clay modeling?
So clay modeling is like a later stage where you have, you go through stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and you have really strong descriptions and an understanding of what you're looking at. And then now you take all that information and you try to model it out. You try to actually feel what it's like to be there, and you use clay to help you model this out and see what that's going to be like. And so, or see if you can kind of get like a physical 3D representation of what you're actually perceiving, from the matrix.
Okay. How does this happen?
So that's,
hold on. Let me narrow that question down. How does this happen? That could mean anything, but is it when we're talking about bilocation or sensing something in perception at a distance, at a location opposite of your own, right? Whether it's the next room or the next country on the other side of the planet. That, and I would say most of it is nearly at real time. So how does that happen? Is that consciousness? Is that entanglement? Is it something at the atomic level that we don't quite understand yet that we are able to tap into? And then going into bilocation takes it into a whole nother category of what this possibly could be. So how do you think remote viewing actually occurs?
That's a beautiful question. And so one of the ways that me as a young, still growing baby in this industry, when I'm comparing myself to like a Paul Smith who has been doing this for 40 years, I'd say that what from the research that I've read and the things that I've read, that this is a process that comes out of or a product of consciousness, that pure consciousness that exists out there, this informational field, this thing that is around us. is something that engulfs all of us. And here's what I believe personally. I'm speaking for me personally. I know from my research, and others can look this up, that we are vibrating molecules and atoms, right? And between those things, existing in that, these vibrating protons, electrons, these things like this, is space. It's mostly space. So nothing, we may see things as solid, but nothing really is solid. And all that space that exists between all of these atoms and molecules and stuff like that, all of that space is a sea of connection, right? It's almost like taking a jar, filling with marbles, and then just pouring water in that jar. All of that water is going and moving in between everything. And so if that water, if that space, if that matrix, that field of information, that consciousness, whatever people want to call it, if that thing is out there and it's in us and around us and through us and everything else, if that web is out there, why there is no real separation between us? We're all in it. We're all in it all the time, you know? So the mind tends to be the brain tends to be an instrument of the mind, and the mind, more and more research is coming out that the mind is not housed inside your brain. The mind actually exists possibly outside of your brain in the sea, or is as a part of, or as consciousness as a whole. This collective that we call consciousness is all of our consciousness, all of our minds together in this greater thing. And so what I believe is that we use this instrument of a brain to tap into that, and then go and retrieve information and bring that information back to our brain, which then, you know, dumbs it down and makes it understandable for us in a way that we can then regurgitate that out so that somebody else can then understand what it is.
Yeah, you have to translate it. You have to somehow transform that into a visual or spoken or something. Right, you have to translate it, or it's just gibberish.
Yeah, and I told somebody before, I look at us as human beings as like ice and a cup of water. We take that same we take a big jug of water, and we pour some of the water out and make ice cubes out of it, and then we put it inside the jug of water. We are then still made of the jug of water, but we're compartmentalized pieces for the time being as ice cubes, but we're still the same water, and we're existing in the same water. And over time, as we grow old and we start to degrade and then eventually transition back into the water, is really the ice cube melting. So we're not separate from that water. We are all, those molecules are all dancing together. We might think of ourselves as separate, but no, we're the same, and we're still inside that you know, jar of water. So
if that's the case, and if we all have this ability, or the ability to take the ability to another level, I should say, we all have the potential, then can you sense if somebody is remote viewing you?
Oh man, I think that's really impressive. You know, you asking some dang good questions. This is great. I believe you can. I believe you can, and I believe that there are hints to this in other people who I would deem as better than me, like Ingo Swann. So Ingo Swann, in his book Penetration, talks about him being, you know, tasked at remote viewing the moon. And he then did that, and he ended up coming upon these, what he called, you know, these entities. He weren't sure what they were. And at some point, those entities became aware that he was there. And they looked in what he would deem his direction and sent him away back to his body. So if we were to believe that story, what we could say is that, yeah, you could be aware. I mean, we also have feelings about, you know, you have people who are mediums and psychics, and these people will say, I feel something, a presence in this room. I feel something happening. Now, that could be an unembodied spirit, or it could be somebody else's own presence remote viewing you. I believe that.
And it could also be bullshit.
And it could also be bullshit. You got it.
Now, and to that end, how do you separate even what you're doing when you're looking at a target? How do you separate the bullshit from something that's more tangible?
Man, this question is great because I've been having that conversation a lot. One of the things that happens is, I truly believe, in this world right now, it's very confusing because you could really, let's say you, Jimmy Church, just walking around and you're not into this psychic stuff, whatever. And then all of a sudden you start having these abilities and you're like, that could be a spiritual awakening, right? That
Right.
could be a spiritual crisis. That could be no shit psychosis, like a psychotic break. And it takes somebody truly talented to help you navigate that. And where we are now is that anytime, because there's so much information out there and there's so many people doing so many different things, anytime somebody has a moment of something that they feel might be a certain way, they will just attribute it to, oh, I've broken through. I've had this
Right.
awakening. And really what it could be that, or it could be that you're not breaking through anything. You're having a break, and that's a very fine line to walk. And it's very tough. It's not something that I do, but I know people out there who help people with that. As a matter of fact, I know a woman who was a psychologist who sent people to get medication for a long time until she then had her own awakening and started realizing that she was misdiagnosing people, or she was a psychiatrist, sorry, and she was misdiagnosing people, and she realized that very quickly and felt really bad about it because some people that she was saying that was mentally unstable actually were having a spiritual crisis and they just really needed help and guidance in that way. And some people obviously were really having, an unstable moment, that wasn't a spiritual awakening, but some people were. And it takes a special trained person to figure that out.
Okay. What is, for people that are observing a remote viewing session, I would say, man, I don't want to sound like a dick. I don't want to come off that way, but I would say that most people want to see this without the possibility of funkiness. Okay, so you're handed the envelope, or right, you've got an envelope, but you haven't looked in that envelope. The only person that knows the target, whatever it is, it could be numbers, a picture, whatever it is, right? Whatever it is only known to one person, right?
Well, if it's done right, it's double blind. So, well, yeah, I guess the tasker or whoever puts it out there would probably know.
So double blind is?
Yeah, double blind means that you as the viewer are blind to it, and anyone who would give you the information directly would be blind to the target as well.
Okay, so excellent explanation. So the person placing the target in the envelope is a third time removed.
Yes.
Or outside of the circle, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And so double blind is one person is handed the envelope, and then do you touch the envelope?
You can touch the envelope, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. And the envelope has a number in it, and that number is an arbitrary number that really relates to, or a number on it, and that arbitrary number that relates to sometimes the image that's inside the envelope, but there's been cases where you just get the number, and the number is arbitrarily located, connected to something out there in the world that you don't even have a connection to other than that number. And then you're just bringing that in. So if you're going through the stages of training somebody, giving them feedback is important. So having a target inside an envelope that they can then look at that target afterwards is important, at least the way I was trained through Paul. But then if you're looking at being operational, you may never have, there's nothing but a number. That's it. So whether you touch an envelope or not, the envelope probably wouldn't have anything in it. It really is just about that number, and that number being tied to whatever the target is through intention, intentionality. So, which is also a major portion of remote viewing and how it works. But that's actually a lot of these different psychic abilities is intention driven. And you'll hear that happen a lot. You'll hear people talk about that a lot.
Now, what about remote viewing Mars? What about remote viewing, I don't know, Zeta Reticuli?
So those could be fun, and there are ways to do it. And Paul has a really cool class on remote viewing anomalous targets. And the downside to that is that it's really difficult to get any type of real feedback from that.
There's no way to prove anything.
Yeah. And so then you can fall easily. And again, I'm not talking down on anybody who has done that. What I'm saying is that you can easily fall into the trap of making shit up, whatever that of saying, oh, I feel like this and that and the other. And because you don't have any way to prove it, but also nobody has a way to prove it wrong, then we can only go off of what we feel like,
Yeah. I mean, if let's take this to a dark area. Remote viewing alien underground bases on the moon.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. No way to prove it. Great potential for bullshit.
Yeah. Now it could be one there, but how do we
could
prove
be. Could be. Right.
Yeah. But how do we prove that? And that's one of the downsides to doing that. And then there comes that thing, like if we look at it from a perspective of intelligence, one of the things that you could say, like they did with Pat Price, is, hey, this guy is almost never wrong. So even though we can't prove what he's saying is 100% correct, what we could do is go off of his track record of getting a lot of really hard stuff right that he shouldn't have answers to. And so you could potentially go off of that and say it's a possibility that this guy is right. But again, we don't have any way to confirm what he's saying other than the fact that he's been right most of the time. And not always is past history an indicator of correctness, or what could happen in the future. So, you could go back and forth. And so then at that point, it becomes, as an individual or individuals, if you're in a group, what do you want to really spend your time on? Am I looking for things that I'll have no answer to, that I just feel are exciting and novel? They have a level of novelty to them, or am I looking to do things that are going to have some way of being proved correct or incorrect, which would also help me get better, right? So if I have a lot of corrects, then that builds my confidence. It's just like shooting a 3-point shot. The more I make them correct, the more my confidence gets built that when I throw this thing in the air, I'm probably going to make it in. The more I miss, the more I'm going to start feeling like maybe I need to play center,
That's why you got it. 1,000 shots a day. You know the drill, man. It's 1,000 shots a day. Okay, so you've got 5 remote viewers, and all are given targets on the hollow moon. I don't know. I'm just making shit up. But something like that. And all 5 come back with nothing from, they come back with the moon is artificial in some way, all 5 out of 5. What would that tell you?
That is a great question. So, the more people you have doing a particular remote viewing or any gathering intelligence that come back with the same thing, means that there's a possibility there might be some truth to it. But here's what they found in remote viewing that also happens. There's a level of like this kind of telepathic overlay that could happen, where you could actually tap into someone else's thoughts or ideas or consciousness, And then that can actually overlay your, so let's say that tasker somewhere out there is thinking that there's a base on the moon and they want to confirm it. There might be a level of these remote viewers tapping into that person's thought process, their pattern, and telepathically sensing that, and then them all picking up on each other. And a perfect example, well, it's not the same, but it's not 100% the same. But I did do a class with a gentleman who was sitting next to me, and we had a blindfold on, and we were given thumb drives. And there was a shape on these thumb drives. And what I found really interesting was that every time we got the answer, after we got done coming up with the answer, our what we thought was the answer, mine was always whatever was on my thumb drive was what he always wrote down, and whatever was on his thumb drive was what I always wrote down. And we did that like 4 times out of 5. And so we were like, are we reading each other's thumb drive, or are we reading the mind of the person who gave it to us, who knows what's on the thumb drive? Like, what's happening? And we weren't really sure. And so there's that idea of this telepathic overlay, and this particular, going back to your original thing, it could be that these guys really did find something on the moon, and it could be that they somehow were picking up on what each other's signal was. And if you have a really overpowering signal as Jimmy, then I might just be picking up, and you start believing in your mind that there's a base on the moon. I might just be picking up on that, and not actually the base on the moon.
Now, when somebody like Paul is teaching a class, now I don't know. I've never taken a class from Paul. I don't know why I've turned down his invitation for that so many times, because I do want to learn. And I've got, as you know, we have a collective circle of friends around us. I have a lot of remote viewing friends, and people that I hold dear to my heart. But I've never, it's a time thing. It's a time management thing. But I haven't taken the step, and I do want to learn, because I've been told over and over again that we all have the ability. You just got to go and learn. So when Paul is giving a class, again, I don't know if he's doing it with 6 or 8 or 30 people at a time. I don't know, or if it's one-on-one.
His classes are always very small. He normally won't go beyond 6 people in a class.
Okay, but that's good. So when that's exactly my question. So when Paul is giving a class and he does a target, it's the same target to all 6?
No, actually, he'll do separate targets, and he has like a target pool, and he also limits us from talking about it. He asks us not to talk about what our targets were when we get our particular targets. So sometimes we may get overlapping targets, but normally he tries to keep that from happening.
Oh, I would do it the opposite. I would give everybody. I would be very interested in testing this, which is what the Psi Games is about, and we'll talk about that when we come back. But
I think this guy named Daz Smith that
Daz has been on the show a few times. I like Daz.
I believe he did an experiment where he kind of made up a target or something of that nature, and he put that. And again, I got to be very careful, because I don't want to misquote his research, because he put a lot of work and effort into it. But it was something along the lines where he came up with a target, and it was all imaginary. It was in his mind, and then he put several remote viewers on it, and they all came up with this target. But it was a made up target. It wasn't an actual place. It was something he made up in his mind. So they all telepathically linked to his thought process and actually was writing it down. So they thought they were actually seeing a real place in existence, and they were perceiving that, and they were writing that down, but really it was something that he had made up.
Yeah, so Daz is very talented. I've seen them do stuff on different continents, same target, and different remote viewers around the world, and watching them draw, because they do it on easels.
Yeah.
Right. You've seen his technique, right? He's got an easel, and he's flipping pages and drawing, and you're watching 2 or 3 people with the same target slowly morph into the same thing. It's very interesting to see, and it's right on the edge of fact, right? Like this is proof. This is a laboratory controlled setting where it's definitive and you can't deny it. Well, that takes it into a whole nother level of fantastical, doesn't it? Where it's hard for people to accept this kind of phenomena.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it is very hard for people to accept the phenomenon because it would shatter our understanding, a lot of people's understanding of what true reality really is, and that there's more to reality than what we want to believe. And that could shatter our personal paradigms and what we believe about the world. And that always shakes up people because the way our minds are wired is that we love patterns. And the way we survive in our world is through patterns. And the only way that you can have a pattern is things keep showing up the same way consistently. And when you have something that breaks those patterns, it really breaks down our idea of comfort because now our brain has to think more deeply.
Yeah, it's psychosis, man. You're
Yes.
stepping in. Yeah, you lose your mind.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
So people get
and
that.
now we're up against a break here. What about remote viewing the distant past and also remote viewing the future? Remote viewing the distant past, you can in a weird way you can kind of fact check, unless you're doing the crucifixion or something, some bullshit like that, where there you can't come up with some proof. But okay, so the past seems like it would be easier to check on. What about remote viewing the future? Is that something that you mess with?
I personally don't mess with it. I have had, like I told you, I when I was younger, I dreamt the lottery, and it came out, and that was a future event. I think that you can. I know that Paul, when I've talked to him about this a few times, the challenge was that the future's still undetermined. So certain things can change that dynamic. So the future you actually viewed might not be the future that you end up.
And isn't that technically just precog?
Yeah, ultimately you're being precognitive, and that's actually one of the challenges that we have in the Psi Games. And it tends to, the way I've heard about it the most and read about it, is that the shorter the span of time, the more likely you are to be successful. So if you're only remote viewing or precogging, doing precognition for an event that happens tomorrow, you're more likely to be successful than if you're doing something that's supposed to happen like 10 years from now. So it is possible. Joe McMonagle, who also is another one of my teachers, talks about that as well, being able to do that. And Lynn Buchanan talks about that as well. So, I mean, there are people out there who have had these experiences, and that's a point. But I think it's probably easier to remote view the past than it is to remote view the future.
If people talk about this stuff all the time, how were the pyramids built? I want to see Noah's Ark. I want to know if that really happened. I want to know about the crucifixion. I want to know if Jesus really died on the cross or if Jesus was real. And we have, but each one of those examples are huge questions of our own past.
Yeah.
Right. And we want those answers, but remote viewing those situations, if we don't have the answers by now, does remote viewing change anything?
That's a great question. So I don't know if it changes anything if we don't have proof, and we can't prove it. If it's an anomalous thing and we can't prove what's going on, then, but I think, for instance, if we could prove that some, let's say, intelligent, civilization was able to build the pyramids with some sort of levitation device, if we were able to say that definitively, then I think it could improve things for us, because what it does now is it makes us aware that there are possibilities outside of our scope of understanding. And that sends us to search what those possibilities are, which hopefully opens up our mind and our consciousness to a new way of thinking about things, which helps us actually develop those things, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So when you, just like one of the reasons I created the Psi Games with the banister effect. So, there was a time people thought you couldn't break the 4-minute mile. They were like, it can't be done, it's impossible, blah, blah, blah. And so
you know what's funny about that? Now people do it running backwards.
Yes, exactly. So then
it
was impossible until somebody did it and proved that it was real. And then it opened up our consciousness to this new possibility. And all of a sudden people started, doing this thing consistently. And so if we were able to remote view a new technology, or how the pyramids were built, or how this thing, and found that it was something, that there was this technology out there that we didn't know about, and now it opens our brain up to that possibility, it could send us down into a direction that allows us to expand and develop in that direction. So in that way, it could be helpful. But again, you need to be able to have that proof. And with UAPs, for instance, we can see these things doing things that we can't explain. So I've heard people say, high-level scientists say that maybe the way we see physics, there's something else that we're missing.
Or that, for sure.
That these things have a certain understanding of physics that we don't understand yet. And what that does is that question changes the dynamic of how we move forward in the world. Because now instead of us just saying in a lab somewhere, that can't be done, that can't be done, this can't be done, we're looking at it and we're saying, well, this thing is doing it. So that means we need to there's something we don't understand, and we need to keep researching so that we can find out what the answers are. And that,
you know what they do? You know how they get those answers?
How?
They just add one of two words to it. They add the word dark, or they add the word quantum. That's what they do. I mean, What do you mean? It's dark dreaming. Oh, okay. What is? It's quantum thinking. You know what I mean? And it's dark energy. It's dark matter. It's quantum this, quantum that, because they don't have those answers, and there's no way to measure it. There's no way to prove it. We know something is happening. We know the phenomenon itself is real. We just don't know how it is happening or why it is happening.
Yep.
And that's where we find ourselves. Now, again, we're up against a break, Hakim. I told you when you come on the show that we're going to just run out of time. And we're not there yet, and we've still got a lot to cover. One last question before the break. Is there a time limit how far back you can remote view? Can you remote view the dinosaurs 65 million years ago? Can you remote view Atlantis 50,000 years ago? Or is there a limit? You can only go back a week. I don't know.
Yeah. So from what I know from what people have done, I have not done this, so I can't speak from a personal experience. But, I trained with Joe McMonagle as well. And Joe has, according to his stories, he's remote viewed the past, very far past. As a matter of fact, he did that on Mars, and he saw beings on Mars and things of that nature. And, we, regardless of maybe there might be a psyop around the moon, and, there are things that look like pyramids, and there are things that look like faces, and, some people say those are made up, and so on and so forth. But I mean, this guy is saying that, he saw these beings, he saw these pyramids, and now we have squares and things that look like squares coming up on the moon. So, or Mars, I should say. So, there are things that possibly are out there, and there are ways to move forward and back in time. And I think that there is no real gauge on that. But I don't know how many people have actually really been able to do that and then also confirm what they saw was actually out there. I think Joe is probably one of the only people, because now we have other people coming out saying, oh yeah, there are pyramids on the moon, so there must be something there, because, and then Joe said that a long time ago. So yeah, I think I would say that there's a possibility that we don't have time limits, especially if time and space, if that dimension doesn't really exist in remote viewing. We already know that distance equals time, and it takes you time to cross distance, basically is what I'm trying to say. And so if all of a sudden you go into this remote viewing space, and now that doesn't matter, I could be across the world or in another world or whatever right now, then that means that time and space don't exist. They're just constant.
Well, okay, that's a great point. How do you know if you're not remote viewing another timeline?
That's a great question. I don't know if you do know you're not remote viewing another timeline.
Right.
I think that gets where things could get a lot more confusing and overwhelming, because you could be jumping timelines if there.
Yeah, I mean, if you came back at me and said, Jimmy, so yeah, I need to talk to you about you because I was but you were skinny and in shape. So I would say, well, that's an alternate. That's you saw me in the metaverse, right? You saw me in a parallel dimension, and how would one know? Because we know, because of entanglement and string theory, that we're running in all kinds of dimensions right now. That's the way the quantum world works. That's how a quantum computer works. So if you are able to tap into that, how do you know if it's accurate in our timeline? It's accurate in that timeline, right? Right. But in our timeline, it may not make any sense. And so how would you know the difference?
Well, the only way I think that you could have some idea whether or not you are on the right timeline is to take control of it, to use your intention as the guiding method in which guides you to wherever you're trying to go. If you just happenstance in it with no intention, then you could end up anywhere. But if you use your intention, all these different people are saying that intention is the key. You go in and you set your intention to be 10,000 years in the past. In this specific timeline, they found that out in remote viewing, that if you did not give the viewer, if you didn't give a viewer a time and a place, then they could jump anywhere in time at the most sensational or spectacular event that happened at that place. So if you didn't say 10 years in the past at such and such location, or at the location that's attached to this coordinate, then they might pop up 10,000 years in the past at that location, looking at two dinosaurs fight each other,
Right.
something like that. So they had to set the intent of what their session was going to yield, and then what also they were going to be looking at or trying to get to. And that, that is the key, I think, is that's the only way that we can really control what timeline we're in, is to use our wizard staff, to focus our energy with intention,
Let's take our break right here. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Hakim Isler, remote viewing and much more. More with Hakim when we come back after this short break. Stay with us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black t-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 t-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. Go Beckley Teppy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. Today we're headed to Bolivia, Tiwanaku, Peru, and of course, Bumapunku. Brian, exciting. Thank you so much for everything, my friend.
Always an honor. Right behind us is the sacred river of the Inca that goes past Machu Picchu. So we're going to be driving up to its source at 15,000 feet above sea level and then down to Lake Titicaca.
So today we hit 15,000 feet.
Yes.
Crazy. And you can do it with us. All you have to do is go to hiddenincatours.com. Simple. We've got 2 tours coming up next year, one in June for the summer solstice, right? And then another one right here in November. So hiddenincatours.com. Come and hang out with Brian and I and his amazing team.
Right on.
River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, our guest, Hakim Isler, is with us. He is a remote viewer, and he's also the creator of the Psi Games that I am going to be hosting later on this year. And Hakim, where did this idea come from?
So the Psi Games actually was kind of a download. Well, it was a download, not kind of a download. And I just had this inspiration, this moment of inspiration of, I told you about earlier what happened where I was teaching kids and they were having this connection to these animation shows where these characters had these abilities. And from my ninja training, I knew that some of those abilities were real. And I would try to tell them this is how you could do it. But I only had the only answer really was to be like me, train in the ninja arts, spend a lot of time in nature, and you might have a experience. And I started looking at these protocols, and then I started having these moments of how do I get the youth onto this train of understanding who we truly are and really carry this into the next generation. And it just came to me, boom, boom, boom. You have to make it fun. You have to make it collaborative. You have to build a community. And the Psi Games was it. And I was like, wow, what would it be like if we had a game where we competed in psychic events? And I was like, oh, no, I'm too busy for that. I don't. I looked it up and nobody had done it. And I was like, okay, well, I'm too busy. I can't do that. And it kept coming back. it kept coming back. And the final straw for me was I was listening to this podcast, and they had this guy from the DIA on there, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and he wrote the book Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. And they were saying to him, like, man, you're talking about these interdimensional beings and beings that have these abilities, and isn't that scary? And the guy said, well, I see no danger or nothing to fear here at all. He said, there's certain things I can't say, but what I can say is that if humans were able to operate at their fullest potential, we wouldn't have anything to be afraid of. And I was like, how do we get human beings to operate at a greater potential? I said, through play and competition, fun, inspiration through competition. And I was like, the Psi Games, I got to do it. And that was the final straw that I was just like, this has to happen, and that was it. And I started from that process, from that moment on, figuring out what the process was going to be to build this thing.
Yeah, I, as everyone knows, I host a lot of events all year long.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen every twist on a conference that you can imagine. And last year when I was presented the Psi Games, and I looked at it, and again, thank you for reaching out, but this has never been done. This is interesting, and for me personally, I want to see this kind of competition go down. But second, I'm in my element. I get to host this exciting angle of this instead of presenter after presenter, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But adding this element to these big questions that all of us have, and to see it go down with judges and to see this play out, this is a very original approach, not only to a conference, but to the subject itself. And I find that really, really exciting. What has the response been like for you so far?
It's been beautiful. I couldn't even I didn't imagine it. That's what it was. It was very scary. It was like, I knew that I had to do it, but there was a lot of fear there, because I was like, if nobody has done it, will anybody really understand what's happening here? And then in the consciousness space, we have the dirty word is competition, and I'm a firm believer that competition is what you make it, so if we come at this from a militaristic or some sort of negative aspect where I'm better than you, you suck, then yeah, obviously that's not conscious.
No, that's fine. No, I hope that happens. I hope that happens, because that makes everybody bring their A game. No pun intended.
Well,
all pun intended, actually.
I think that it can still be done in an inspirational way where we motivate each other to push each other to the next level, not in a toxic way, but in a very friendly, motivational way. Here's a perfect example. I watched a documentary on Netflix about these kids with the Rubik's Cubes. Yep. And these parents were talking about this kid who had autism, and he didn't want to come out of his room. He couldn't connect with anybody in the world. He just didn't want anything to do. And on YouTube, he ended up finding this Rubik's Cube and, thing and competition. And he asked his parents for one. They got him one, and he became really good at it. And then he asked them if he could go to this competition. So they were nervous because they were like, he's not a people person. He doesn't like to be around people. He ended up finding his community and his tribe. And now he's a champion, one of the highest ranking champions. And him and all his friends get together. All the other former champions and current champions get together on Zooms, and they push themselves. So they're not there saying you're a dork or you're this or you're that, and I'm the coolest. They're like, hey, you're really good today, but we're gonna work together to see how far we can push each other to the next level, how far we can inspire each other to the next level. And that really is what I would love to see. I would love to see people building a community of friends who are researchers, scientists, psychics, people who could do this, who could talk about it, who can teach it, who can research it all together so that we could really grow this to the next level. And through competition, we find true motivation. I mean, a lot of our innovation has happened because we were competing to get to a new stage or a new level. I mean, we found ourselves in space from one of the greatest competitions, the space race, and we saw with the Bannister effect how we went from thinking that the 4-minute mile was impossible to multiple people being able to break through that 4-minute mile. So, and one last thing I would love to add to that is that I have a friend, he also will be at the Psi Games. He's a memory champion, 6-time memory champion. And what he saw, he said when he first got into this arena, there were very few people who were doing this memory thing. And they had a game, and the game was how many cards or how fast can you memorize a deck of cards? And he said nobody knew what the standard was because nobody really had spent time doing that. Then they finally came up with 30 seconds was the standard. And for years, nobody could beat 30 seconds. And then one day somebody beat it at like 25 seconds. And then guess what happened the next year? All of a sudden, all these people who could never beat 30 were now like at 26, 28, like they had beat 30 seconds.
Right.
And he said just recently they had a person come and they beat all of those scores. And now the new standard is 15 seconds.
That's crazy.
So they went from not knowing to 30 to 20 to now 15 in a couple years because they consistently motivated one another and inspired each other to a new level of what the mind could do. And now we have a new identifier of how capable the mind is when it comes down to memory through these games.
What are some of the categories? What are some of the games that we're going to be doing?
So we have 5 categories. They are mind sight, being able to see without your eyes, remote viewing, being able to see things in a different time and place. We have pendulum dowsing, being able to identify targets and things in different areas. And we have precog, being able to see the future, like we were talking about. And then know what's going to happen at a future time. And then the last one we have is psychokinesis, being able to use your mind to influence physical objects.
So no fire starting.
No pyrokinesis. No.
Yeah, pyrokinesis. That's what they call it. I love this, and so let's start with each one of these categories. So much research, and the Russians were at the forefront of a lot of this for sure.
The Russians and the Chinese, actually, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Telekinesis. So how I hope we have somebody that jumps up and goes in your face. I hope that happens.
Yeah. So just to be clear, so telekinesis actually is just your ability using.
Is it going to be moving an object? Is something under glass?
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
So we're going to use because those things can be. Skeptics can come out of the woodworks and they could say, "Oh, these guys."
Well, that's the danger with the Psi Games in general.
Oh yeah.
So you have to set these standards that they have to be pierce proof.
Yeah.
Nobody should be able to shoot a hole in any of this.
Yes, and that's one of that was one of the delicate aspects of creating the Psi Games is that if you make it too crazy and chaotic where a person can't even begin to succeed, then people will walk away and say, "Yeah, I told you all that stuff was fake." If you make it too easy where people are succeeding every 2 seconds, then you'll have people walking away saying, "I told you that was fake." And either way, it's going to hurt the field. And so we have to be very mindful. So with the psychokinesis, what we're using is random number generators to create a scenario where a person cannot, a skeptic can't look at that and say, oh, well, they just used their breath to blow the thing over, or they had a string attached that nobody can see and pulled it and now it moved. So we're using this kind of random number generator that we have to influence. And now a lot of that research comes out of the Pear Lab that was in Princeton, right? They did a lot of research on psychokinesis and your ability to be able to influence random numbers and random number generators. And they found a lot of success with that. So we're going to have some games that are built around that concept.
Now, Adam Curry has done a lot of work in this field.
Yeah. Adam Curry is actually on there as part of the Psi Games. Yeah.
Sure. I was, he's an obvious person to bring in as a professional when it comes to this. So what would be the definition of, I'm just looking at the clock here, I want to get the rest of this stuff in. How does somebody win the psychokinesis, the telekinesis, I should say, random generator competition?
So somebody wins with more hits or more influence than another person that gives them more points than that other person. So for instance, if one of the things is we want to generate more ones than we do twos, this is not one of the games, but this just gives you an example. I'm very cautious about putting out what the games are just to make sure people don't try to game it, but let's say we say, hey, we want to see more twos show up on the board in this timeline, right? And if I do it and I have 100 twos show up in 30 seconds, and you have 52 show up in 30 seconds, then I obviously get the higher points. So I'll get 10 points per every 50. So I'll get 20, I'll get 10 points for 50 and I'll get 10 points for another 50 to make 100. So that's 20 points total. And only because you are only able to get 50, then you get 10 points, So then when it comes to the end, I would win that round or that, that game because I had more. But it's 5 of us that are going to be doing these games at the same time. So if another person has 150, then they're going to walk away with 30 points. So they're going to win,
Now, what about the mind?
Yeah.
You cut out.
Mind sight?
Oh, yeah, mind sight.
Yeah.
And I have the mask, right? I have the mind sight mask. That is something else that fascinated me. So I'm going to take a stab at this. Are they going to have to read like a page of War and Peace?
So reading what mind sight is super difficult. So maybe not that to that extreme, but being able to find or different types of objects or colors or things of that nature in a faster amount of time than another person might be something that you could do.
So flash cards, right? I've seen that.
Yeah, there's been flashcards, people getting more, having your blindfold on and shapes pop up and you can say more of the shapes than the other person and, in a faster timeline. We're going to put a time standard on it, which people have to be aware of. So it's not going to be like sit here and take as long as you want. It's like, no, everybody gets the same amount of time, 1 minute, 2 minutes, whatever that timeline is. And you got to do as much as you can in that timeline. So it really pushes you to be able to get to that point. And if you signed up today, you got 5 months to train before you actually show up and compete. So if you're already at a pretty decent level, then you could do that. And we're assessing people. So you actually, if you sign up or apply to be a competitor and actually be a contestant, then you have to actually do an assessment. And then we can determine to what level your abilities are to make sure that you can score beyond chance, because there's still that potential that a person comes and they have performance anxiety and they don't do as well. And then you have a skeptic say, well, they couldn't do it anyway, and it's like, no.
Are professionals invited? Does Paul Smith get to remote view? Do you get to remote view? Does my producer, Michelle, who's a big cheater anyway, does Michelle, you know what I mean? Professionals, do they get to be involved?
They do not get to be involved if they are a part of the games, like if they're judged. But if you're a professional and you want to come compete, absolutely you can compete.
What about a teacher from the Monroe Institute?
Yeah, the Monroe Institute is actually thinking about putting a team together. So they'll probably have a whole team there.
See, cheaters. That's cheating. I would love to see that.
Yeah,
I would love to see that.
And it's going to take some brave individuals. Nobody has done this, and people who are willing to not get caught up in the outcome, who just want to show up, have a good time, and see how far we can push this thing. And we may be surprised, and then we find the next Pat Price and the next Ingo Swann, or somebody who we can now base all of our future aspirations off of. Okay, so if Jimmy can do X, Y, and Z, and we didn't think that was possible, okay, now I know it's possible. Let me spend the next year between now and the next Psi Games stepping my game up and really training to that level, so next year I'm now at where Jimmy was last year, and hopefully Jimmy's even better. So now you're going to push me to the next level the following year. So, and now we'll start seeing real change, because right now what consciousness field has is either you come into the world as an anomaly, like we're seeing with the telepathy tapes, where these youth are coming in, and now people are like, whoa, these guys have these abilities, but we've been writing about these abilities for generations. But the case is that we don't have a lot of people really spending time practicing them, because they have to do it on their own dime, and then it's just for fun, unless they're going to go and join like a remote viewing team where they work for a company. You have to push yourself. But what if we can inspire a whole generation to get off of the actual video game and spend that amount of time, and this is the key, Jimmy, spend that amount of time going within that they spend without on the video game? Could you imagine a 15-year-old, instead of spending 8 hours after school on Metal Gear Solid or Medal of Honor or whatever game is out there now, Halo, and spending even half of that meditating so that they can raise their psychic ability? Where would the world be if you had a 15-year-old spend the next 10 years doing that? We'd be on a whole, I can't even fathom it. And they did it because it was fun. And they did it with their friends over Zoom. And then they came to this event and they were celebrated because of it. Not called weird or weirdo, or there's no future in that, or you're a liar or something like that. But no, they were encouraged and celebrated for these things, and they were motivated and inspired to new levels. We would have the future, of the next 20 years would look totally different for you and me when we start seeing those people become adults as really, really high level conscious beings on the face of the planet. That's what this really is about. Again,
yeah,
it's not, it's not about this, it's not about this toxic thing. It's about this loving thing, about meeting people where they are. We could talk all day about how kids should put down the games, but unless you motivate them and give them a reason, they're not going to do it. They're going to do more of it because this VR and virtual reality and these headsets are getting even better. So why do I want to be a part of a reality that I can't even be my best self in? Because I could be my best fake self in this virtual reality world. Well, what if we taught people how to be their best self in their inner world, and they were excited to do it? Then we start seeing real change.
Some of this competition is time-based, so you have a definitive winner based on time and performance. Yes. What are the other ones, like the remote viewing? I'm just guessing here. It's your conference. But what about when it's open to interpretation? Who was the closest? And like, I'm assuming in the remote viewing target, who was closest to the target? Is that then judged? Do you have judges hold out, a 10, a 9, a 9.8?
Yeah. So for the remote viewing, we're going to have all seasoned judges like Paul Smith, people who have spent years looking at remote viewing.
Is McMonagle going to be there?
Unfortunately, no. I don't think McMonagle is going to.
Man, I want a McMonagle selfie. I'm out. I just changed my mind.
Okay,
I want a McMonagle selfie, man.
Just for you, I might invite him. How about that?
Yeah, man. Okay, so anyway, back to judging.
Yeah. So I think that so then they will take your session or your information and they will look at that and they will score that accordingly. And it could be kind of not very difficult. Let's say the target has the color blue, red, yellow, green in it, right? And everybody in their descriptors, they write, so one person writes blue and red, another person writes green by itself, but all the other colors are wrong. If we say we're going to give you a point per color that you get right, and you have 3 colors that are actually in the photo, and the other person only has 1 color in the photo, then we give you 3 points and that person gets 1 point. You get what I'm saying? So then we're able to kind of build on that. And that just, again, I'm being cautious about how much about the different games I give out, but I'm just trying to give you some ideas of how we could possibly judge or how things could be judged. But, we got seasoned professionals who have been looking at people's sketches and their information and their remote viewings for a long time, so these people will be able to, they're the most qualified to be judges for people who would be doing these games.
So that's 3. What are the other 2 categories?
So we did mind sight remote viewing, and what was the other one that we did? Oh, psychokinesis. So it's precognition.
Oh yeah, precog. Now, okay. So how was that handled?
So I'll tell you, in our assessment online, we actually have a digital game, and the game has it pops up 2 doors, and you have to be able to perceive what door is going to have like the pot of gold behind it, and you have to choose the right door, right? So you have to perceive that future event and know where that door is going to be. I mean, know where the door is going to pop up. That's going to have the best, the gold behind it, or where that gold's going to pop up behind what door. So that would be one way, but there's other ways to do precog. There's again, random number generators and giving you, let's say, 1 to 5, and then you could choose what number you think is going to pop up, and you have to perceive that ahead of time.
What about a headline on a newspaper the following day?
You could do that, but then we'd have to wait for the following day, and then
that's right. It's a 2-day competition.
Yeah, and that would be one of those possibilities, but it also mean that it'll be hard to time. And then, you probably say, well, somebody cheated somehow, or they tried to game it or figure it out. If it happens randomly generated or somewhat quick, then it's a lot hard to.
Yeah. No. If I'm the host, right, and I'm standing there and I've got the microphone and I announce this, I go, okay, you have got 5 seconds to write down the headline for 12 noon tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Give me your headlines. And then at 12 noon the next day, we see what the breaking headlines are.
Yeah, that's a possibility. I mean, I've done stuff.
You don't
like
get a chance to Google or call your buddy at the New York Times, right? Yeah, you know what I'm saying, right? There's no possibility for that. And then the winner would be the crazy, right? I mean, the absolute, not an earthquake, right? Well, there's an earthquake anywhere in the world all day, every day. So anything like that gets thrown out. That's disqualified. But, something crazy, right? Like bank robbery in Boston or whatever it is, whatever that headline would be. Man chokes on banana cream pie in Paris cafe. Right?
Yeah.
So
that's a high level of precog, though, and I don't know. You
want a winner. Okay, so this is my next point.
Yeah.
And we didn't get to the 5th competition, but the media I think would really be interested in a competition like this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think so too. And again, I even if I had a game that was similar to that, I would not say yay or nay. But that's a great one. That would be a great competition.
I mean, that's right. You know, it's a game. It's
Yeah,
a game show. And, you know, the audience, myself included, I want to see, you know, something really nuts.
yeah,
Something really nuts. And we're all in. I think that I was going to ask you about this earlier, that we all have experienced something. We've
yeah,
all, everybody has experienced deja vu. Everybody has experienced, you know, man, wonder what's up with Bob. I haven't talked to Bob in 10 years. Holy shit, he's calling me right now. We've all experienced that, right? So
yeah.
these abilities are there. They're for real. We just have to figure out a way to tap into it. And these games will help people do that.
Yeah, yeah. Very true. Very true. And that's really what it's to take it out of the realm of the impossible or the realm of, maybe that happened, maybe that didn't, and start giving people more examples of, oh, this really is a thing. There's people out there that can train this, that can do it. Because right now, again, like we said, is very, unless you go to these places like Monroe Institute or the Rhine Institute or these different trainings, it's tough to really understand how many people can really do this and how often and how normal people are just doing it. You have to really seek it out. So what we're trying to do is bring this to the forefront of people's attention in this fun way, an exciting way to watch it, where you can just be a spectator. You don't actually have to pay $1 bazillion to go do a class. You just show up for a couple bucks and check this thing out and see how people are doing it. And then if you happen to want to get more information or learn, then there are people there who can teach you as well. That is what we're trying to do. And because right now, if you want to learn this, you got to be really in it. You got to say, oh, you know what? I'm going to drop $3,000 to go train at this location, and not everybody believes enough to want to go that route. But to say, hey, take a few bucks and come and see people do it and just have a good time, I feel like that would be the inspiration that people need to move to the next level.
Well, there's another aspect for all of this. And that is, once you observe or see this or start to research it for yourself, how it changes you and you can apply this to your life,
Yes.
right? To day-to-day living and how it changes your perception of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I came back from Naked and Afraid, to speak of just going on a base root level, root chakra, this idea that I like what was truly important. Like it was hard for me to take all the bullshit serious after that, because I'm like, bro,
Mm-hmm.
water, food, relationships, shelter, that's really all that matters. All this other crap that we put on ourselves is just crap. That's what really matters. And when you start to recognize how united we are through spirit, through consciousness, how what we thought was important is not really important, how things work in this magical symphony, it changes your outlook on life. It really
Yeah,
does.
I came out of I was at my hotel in the Sacred Valley in Peru, and I come out to go and meet some people, and outside of my room at this resort is this lady. I shot a video, I posted it. There's a lady weaving an alpaca piece of cloth. I don't know what it's going to turn into, right? A shawl, a shirt, a sweater, a scarf, whatever, but it was beautiful. And I stopped and I looked at her, and she could sense me I'm standing over her, right? And I'm watching her weave this, and it's beautiful. I mean, this is Michelangelo shit, right? It's like world. And I'm watching her, and she's probably, I don't know, 70, 80 years old. Talent, right? A whole lifetime of learning this art, this craft. And I'm standing above her. She doesn't speak English. And I say something to her, and she laughs. And that woman right there, do you think she gives a shit about Bitcoin? Right?
Yeah.
Do you think she gives a crap about any of the distractions that we have that we consider so important? And you're right, they're not. You know, did Bitcoin help you in the Himalayas?
Nope. None.
Did
Not
Reddit missing right? Did Facebook matter to you in the Himalayas?
Not at all. Zero.
At day 14, and you got 7 more to go.
Yeah, zero. You're right. That's it. That's it. And I think the more we spend internally, the more we start to really know that more, you know. And right now, most of our senses are out there, and very little of our sense of self and really understanding who we are is in here. And so the more we can motivate and inspire people to do that, it has a positive outcome. And we're talking not just about doing that for adults who make their own choices, but for these kids who will come up and then become the next generation of parents who won't talk down on their children who have these experiences. Instead, they will say, yes, that is possible. And if you want to learn more, I can teach you, or I can show you, or I can help you get more of that knowledge and understanding. Because right now, I think it's probably, and this is just me saying, I don't have any statistics on this, but I feel pretty confident in saying that probably there are more parents out there who, if a child came to them and said, hey, I can sense things in other times and places, that they'd probably either say, don't do that anymore, or that's a great imagination, honey, move on, but not really take it serious. And hopefully we can change that paradigm. If you listen to the telepathy tapes, it's all over. They talk about it all the time. Hey, this kid was saying, I can read your mind. And the parents was like, that's a lie. And the teacher was like, that's a lie. And they kept doing it. And then all of a sudden, everybody had to start saying, oh, wait a minute, this is true. And then they started trying to tell other people. And those people were like, you're crazy.
Yeah, and the kids were like, we all do it, man.
Yeah, exactly.
What are you talking about? I mean, we all get together and hang out and in our minds, and we communicate this way. And I think that some of the most groundbreaking research into the subject, but from a demographic that you would never expect, a demographic that is ignored.
Yeah. And probably in that being ignored actually helped them become more, that idea that nobody was really paying attention or interacting. So then they started to interact. They spent that time internally, and interacting internally. And then that kind of blossomed into this thing.
Yeah. There's a Academy Award-winning documentary. It's called King Gimp. And for those of you out there that have never seen it, write it down. It's called King Gimp. Now, that won an Academy Award, I think, in 98. And I'm watching the documentary, and it's about, it's the life of this kid. His name is Daniel Keplinger. And I'm watching the documentary, and it starts when he's just a kid. He's paralyzed from the neck down. They've got him all swaddled up. So, but he would roll around little. And so this is his life. The documentary follows. I don't want to give anything away. Everybody should go and watch it. But at a certain point of this documentary film crew that accidentally they're shooting a documentary on something else. They accidentally find out that this kid, Daniel, who society has written off, he's rolling around the floor by himself, right? That this kid knows what they are saying. And they are actually talking about math. And anyway, the bottom line is Daniel Keplinger, who became a friend of mine, by the way, I reached out to him, and we're still in contact. He went on to not only become this, go from this swaddled, lifeless, mistreated child to one of the most incredible fine artists in the world. He's a painter now. And how he paints and everything else. Okay, so go and watch that documentary. And what that, I cried for a week. Okay, I got to a certain point in the documentary, like 30 minutes in, when I went, oh shit, what? And I cried. Dude, I cried uncontrollably. Okay. And I watched it over and over and over again. I ended up reaching out to him and stuff. If that isn't inspirational, I say to people all the time, what have you done with your life? Go watch King Gimp and you complain to me about something. I dare you to complain about anything. And you just never know. The mind is powerful. All of these, and the telepathy tapes definitely shows us that there is so much more to everybody on this planet. Do not write anything off. There's something else going on in this reality. Don't write that off. We don't live in this two-dimensional bullshit that everybody wants to paint for us. No, the world and the universe is an incredible place, and we need to get to the bottom of all of it. You said it earlier in this show. How much better off would we be if we all just tapped in to our inner consciousness and understood what is going on? And that's what the Psi Games is all about, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely.
King Gimp. Did you write it down?
I wrote it down. Yes.
Yeah, I remote viewed you writing it down. Watch it. If that isn't the most inspirational, I'm gonna put it in the chat right now. And Bill or Jessica or somebody put up the link to it. And that's a game changer right there. It's called King Gimp. Incredible. Hakim, where can everybody sign up, register, try to become a contestant, participate, or buy tickets and get all their information for the Psi Games?
Yeah, they can go to psigamesinternational.com, psigamesinternational.com. You, Jimmy, you're there. So there's a discount code if they ever wanted to sign up and use that code. I'm sure you're going to have it in your show notes and all that stuff.
Oh, I have a discount code?
Yeah, man, you got a discount.
Man, I'm not a remote viewer. You got to send that shit to me in an email. Okay, what's my discount code?
It should be Jimmy C 20 PGI 25, or it's either Jimmy
C PGI 25, all caps or what?
Yeah, all caps. And if it's, I got to look at it because I'm sure we sent it to you, but I'll send it to you again.
Okay, Jimmy C PGI 25.
Yeah, and that'll be that'll definitely give people 20% off if they wanted to sign up for any of the tiers. And that's it, man. I mean, it's an amazing event for people to come to. They get support in multitude of ways. Even if they can't make it and they want to donate, they can, because it's under a 501c3 called QuestGate. And that's the 501c3 housing the Psi Games. And it's just, we are, this isn't something that we're trying to make money off of. This is something that we're trying to create so that we can create a culture of action. Not people talking about shit all day about you should do this or you should do that or whatever. No, a place where we get together with researchers, those who know how to do and teach, all together under one roof, those of different age brackets, where we can actually build a community of collaboration, fun, and inspiration. That's what the Psi Games is about. And if you stand behind that, then you stand behind us, and we would love to have you support it. And and that's just really what we're about.
Thank you so much, Hakim. Enjoy the rest of your night, my friend, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Perfect night on the show. We've got the links for everything below. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. Go Beckley Teppy. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Special thanks to Bill, John, Dex, Jessica, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro, Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Go Beckley Teppy.